Great. Well, thanks for coming. Welcome. We're going to be talking in this session about big data analytics, diverse use cases, and diverse architectures appropriate to use for them. So here's the agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about some typical big data use cases for analytics, some data store specific challenges, and big data analytic techniques. And we're going to visit the advantages and the challenges or drawbacks with each one. If we have time at the end, we'll take some questions. This is me. I'm Ben Connors, Worldwide Head of Alliances at TIBCO Analytics, and I've been in the database and business intelligence business for over 20 years now. So just briefly, what we're going to cover today is several common big data use cases, the analytics requirements for each, and the architectural challenges. We are not going to talk at all about what big data is. I think all of you are expert about this, and there are lots of great sources on Google about it. So just a brief introduction to TIBCO and the analytics group at TIBCO. We're about 500 employees, about 500,000 community users, over 5,000 customers, and one of the top 10 BI vendors. So that's where we're coming from. And what we're going to talk about is connecting to big data, the different access techniques to match the diverse requirements, and how you can use each one individually, each of these techniques individually, or combine them to maximize your benefit. So here's some example classes of big data use cases. Customers are using big data for things like historical pattern analysis to find trends in sentiment analysis or seasonality of searches. Another use case is operational reporting to look at things like clickstream analysis, sensor data, customer defection patterns, and so forth. Data exploration by data scientists for things like research and causal analysis. And finally, multi-source analysis, bringing data in from disparate data sources to find patterns in revenue, for example, that might correlate to external factors, looking at political science type of analysis, or even pure science research in physics, chemistry, the medical sciences, etc. So I think Doug Henschen summed it up well from Information Week when he said that success in big data is a lot more than about getting insights than about the size itself. And that's what we'll try to talk about in this presentation. So one of the takeaways you should leave from today's presentation is that one size does not fit all. We're going to talk about several different approaches, and each one, as you'll see, is great in some ways, but has some drawbacks that may not make it perfect for every situation. So keep that in mind as we explore these various cases. First, let's talk about native direct access. This is where you can use front ends like TIBCO Analytics, going through a BI server to connect natively to big data sources like Hadoop, MongoDB, Cassandra, columnar databases, etc. This is great in some ways, but again, it does have some considerations, some challenges. Some of the pros are that you leverage the full underlying functionality of the data store because you're connecting directly to it. Also, it can be very fast for query latency. It depends on the type of connection, but there are definitely connections available for native connectivity where you can get interactive, near real-time response. Also, no memory limits. You're drawing on the power of the underlying data engine, and so you get benefits like fault tolerance, great scalability, etc. And also no bulk movement of data. You're using it in situ, right at the place where it lives, so you don't have to burden systems, networks, etc. with the movement of the data. It's not perfect for every situation. It does have some cons. For example, limited tool choices. TIBCO Analytics has written some native connectors, and so that we're one of a few vendors, but you may have an incumbent vendor, for example, in your shop that doesn't do this, and so it may not be an option for you if you're locked into an incumbent tool. Secondly, memory limits and fault tolerance can be a challenge here. as well as depending on the type of connector, query latency. For example, Hadoop Hive is known to be a high latency connector, whereas something like Impala or Spark is a low latency connector. And also things like security, because you are accessing the whole underlying data store, you have to be careful about making sure that you don't give unauthorized access in a wholesale fashion. Next, we'll talk about a semantic layer for simplified data access. Here, you can enable self-service BI by defining a semantic layer on top of big data sources. And this has some real advantages in simplifying access for data users, providing self-service and ad hoc capabilities, again, avoiding the bulk movement of data, you leave it in place, and providing low latency queries. On the other hand, you do incur a little bit of performance overhead because there is another layer of software, and you lose the access to underlying functionality in some cases where the underlying data source may have some additional capabilities that don't translate through this metadata layer. Next, let's talk about data federation for rapid blending from not only big data sources, but also some traditional data sources, as you see over here. This allows you to combine the data without moving it. And this is great, again, to provide simplified access for users and for self-service. You don't have to move the data. You can do low latency queries. And you can quickly and cheaply, really, combine operational and NoSQL data for better insights. On the con side, it does incur some performance overhead. You do lose some of the access to underlying functionality as before. And you do have network overhead at query time because you can be bringing these large data sets across the network to combine them. Finally, let's talk about moving and combining the data using extract, transform, and load, or ETL. And in this case, you can connect and move the data from where it's currently situated into something like a relational database. This has some real pros. You can use relational database functionality, get low latency queries, use quite a broad spectrum of SQL tools, insert some value add in the process, like data cleansing or multiple data source combination. But on the other hand, the cons have added expense for the software, has added complexity in using this ETL layer. And also, probably one of the biggest drawbacks is a very high latency for the ETL process, often hours or even overnight or days to do the ETL process and move the data. So in summary, there are multiple use cases and multiple technical approaches. It is not a one-size-fits-all approach. As we saw, we have native, semantic layer, federated, and extract, transform, and load approaches. TIBCO Analytics offers products in every one of these use cases, a full stack, everything from embedded analytics to predictive analytics, data discovery, reporting, KPIs, etc. So you should choose a tool appropriate for what you're doing and use it to best advantage. So I think we're just about at the top of the time slot. If there are any questions, be happy to answer them either here or outside the auditorium. Okay. And please be sure to visit us at our booth down at the end by the lunchroom, off to my left, your right. Thanks very much.